You're listening to The Blind Chick, an AfterSight original podcast. We're telling you stories about strength, overcoming hurdles, and living experiences. We see who you really are. Blindness can be an adventure. Are you ready for the journey of a lifetime? We are. Hey everybody. Guess what? Penn's birthday is coming up very soon. And we want to give Penn an amazing birthday present. So Penn, turn this off. You don't get to listen to this. And I know you're going to listen to it anyway, but it doesn't matter. Everybody, we need you to send birthday cards to Penn. Her birthday is coming up March 24th. And we want to show love and kindness and just pour out on her. We want to do more than this stupid clicking on Facebook, happy birthday. No, we're not doing that anymore. No, we're getting real now. We're going to send out cards and birthday wishes. So if you want to send birthday cards, reach out. You can send the birthday cards to the office. We'll get them there. So here you go. The address is 1700 55th Street, Suite A in Boulder, Colorado, 80301. So make sure that you get those cards in, and we're going to have an amazing time. We're going to do some cool filming stuff, her opening them and all that kind of stuff. So if you send a birthday card or you want to send a voicemail birthday greeting, we will air that live and it'll be fantastic. So get those in. All right. Enough of me chatting. You guys want to hear the second part of our interview with Penny Rosenblum. Man, the first episode was just absolutely incredible. And there's so much more information about education and how we advocate for our students in education in the blind, low vision community. You're going to want to also check out Navigating Life with Vision Loss, because Penny was also on there, and she's going to be on in a couple of weeks talking about accountability and accessibility and advocacy in education, and she dives really deep into that with Kim. So go check those out. Check out all of our other listings: Blind Sight, Blind Level Tech, Navigating Life with Vision Loss, obviously The Blind Chick, and we have a new show coming up, but I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. All right, part 2. Let's go.
So many parents cripple their kids by doing everything for them and be more than just the talking. And I had the personal experience, because Penn and I have been together forever, that I was as bad as anybody. So it would be like it took me years to stop telling her what the sidewalk looked in front of her, or, oh, there's stairs coming up, or, oh, there's this. And luckily I didn't do the bit of, oh, I'll do it for you. But what do you do with the parents who are crippling their kids?
So, I think first off, we need to acknowledge that every family is doing the best that they can on any given day.
Right.
And so, everything's on a continuum. So there are going to be some days where you're going to put Sue's socks on and shoes on because we need to get out the door, or you're going to get fired from your job.
Right.
But so part of what I think is really important is to not be overcritical of yourself, but can you say that on Saturdays when we're going to the park, and if we get there at 10:05 or we get there at 10:15, the world is not going to come to an end.
Right.
That you are going to let your child put on their shoes and socks. And that might mean that they spend 20 minutes in their bedroom trying to find those shoes, even though you see one sticking out from under the bed and the other one is on top of the toy chest.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, part of, I think, what we need to think about it with families, and again, this also applies to older adults too, who start to lose vision, which is a huge part of our population, is when can I step back and say, let me know if you want my help, and walk away.
Oh.
Because that's putting ownership on that child or that adult to make the decision. And if you're standing there staring at them, even if they can't see you staring at them, they know you're there.
We know you're staring.
Yes. then you're making it so much easier for them to just say, well, tell me where my shoes are, or you put my shoes on. Versus if you walk away and say, let me know if you need my help, then you're putting the onus on them. And saying to your child things like, I'm so proud of you for looking for your shoes. So I'll put the first one on. Now here, you put the second one on, because you did do a good job looking for them.
Yeah.
One of my pet peeves in life for all of us, please don't say good job. Take good job out of your vocabulary right now.
Exactly.
Because honestly, especially when we're talking about children and they hear so much of this fake, good job, wow, you did it, good job. Be very specific. You found your right shoe under your bed. Way to go. Look at that. You got the cereal down out of the cabinet and poured it in with only getting 3 pieces on the counter instead of like half the box like you did last month. I'm so proud of you.
Yeah.
Don't expect perfection.
Yeah.
And acknowledge what the person has done. That's, quote, the good job. And then also to give realistic feedback. If we keep saying, oh, you poured your cereal, and then we're going behind as the parent or the aunt or the, whoever, and cleaning up the mess, then how's that person supposed to know that they got half the cereal on the counter and half the cereal in the bowl?
Yeah.
We have to give realistic feedback.
And carrying that farther, what about, do you get into the parent teaching the kid to cook like parents would with a sighted kid, teaching the kid to clean, teaching the kid to do all the stuff, their chores around the house, and then say, you go do it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't particularly have any kids, but I am trying to train the husband.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, that's an ongoing project.
But actually, he has trained me not to get coffee grounds all over the counter when I'm emptying the coffee pot. So, but I think really, Moses, to go with what your question is, your child who happens to have a visual impairment or happens to have blonde hair or happens to be short or happens to be tall is a child first. And you need to have expectations for that child like you would with a child who happens to be short or a child who happens to have brown hair or a child who happens to have typical vision. Yeah. And so things really start at home. If you don't expect things from your child, if you don't give them opportunities, then you're missing out. Now, at the same time, if I'm a parent of 3 young children and one of them happens to be blind, okay, my 2 children who happen to be sighted are going to see how I take my plate from the dinner table, scrape it off into the trash can, and put it into the dishwasher. My blind kid isn't seeing that happen, at lunchtime and dinner time every day, let's say. So I am going to have to show my child how this is done. And it is going to take more practice because the first time they are going to scrape their plate onto the floor and not into the trash can. And the second time that's going to happen too. And maybe the third time. And the first time they go to put it in the dishwasher, it may not be exactly lined up the way I want plates lined up in my dishwasher.
Right.
So it's going to take more time. So that's another reason why we really have got to start young.
Right.
So that child gets more opportunities to practice and to get that realistic feedback and those expectations that, hey, I'm behind you and I do expect you to learn how to scrape this plate and put it in the dishwasher just like your 2 brothers are doing.
Yeah.
That's mind-blowing to me because you just hit something I'd never even thought of. Any teacher knows that children are the best teachers of children. And you just pointed out a blind child doesn't have all those visual cues of watching their brothers and sisters.
Right.
Wow.
Or the kids in the preschool classroom or, I was just talking to somebody yesterday. This is a little side note, but let's think back to 5 years ago in the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. One of the first things we were all hearing was, you needed to stand 6 feet from somebody.
Yes.
Well, how did all those sighted people figure out? They looked and then they also saw those markings on the floor because everybody started putting little footprints and tape marks down. And our blind kids and our low vision kids, they weren't seeing that, neither were our grown-ups. And so how do I start to even get concepts like 6 feet? That's a really abstract concept. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really kind of tough to get. So part of our job too as parents is to explain what's going on in the world. And you gave the example about, talking too much about that sidewalk. There's a balance there too. We do want to give our visually impaired children information about what's going on around them. Not a constant dialogue, but enough information so that those things that other people learn, what we call incidentally by observing, our visually impaired child can become aware of. And that's really important, because it's amazing how many little nuances kids don't pick up on when they don't have vision. Like, for example, the inside of an apple is white. And I know adults who are visually impaired who just assume because apples are red or apples are green or apples are yellow, that color that they can't see is all the way through.
Right.
Now, does my world come to the end if I don't know that an inside of an apple is white? No, it doesn't. Or that applesauce is actually brown, whether you make it with red, yellow, or green apples? No. But there are some pieces of information that are going to impact my interactions with people, my understanding of the world, and my building on other concepts that I might be using in my education or in my employment.
Right. Wow. So Penny, can you share as somebody who has low vision, like how do you get around like transportation? I know for me, as somebody with extreme low vision, is my number one pain in the butt. And I know you've worked in that area and have some expertise. Can you share a little bit about
Absolutely
that road?
So I think both you and Moses and your audience will get a kick out of this. My dad, long before I was born, actually started a driving school in New Jersey called Howell Auto Driving School. Howell was the name of the town, Howell. So it's kind of ironic. He had a wife who was afraid to drive, and he had a daughter who was visually impaired who legally couldn't drive. But he did get to teach one daughter how to drive, and she has a driver's license and drives around New Jersey.
Nice.
But, growing up in suburban New Jersey, there really weren't a lot of options for transportation. And I had a little bit of orientation and mobility instruction, but not a lot. So when I got into my 20s, I really didn't have a toolbox of transportation tools. So I really had to learn things like, planning a route, working with somebody to be a driver, even if it was informal. Like, hey, let me buy you lunch in exchange for you taking me to the grocery store because I'm living in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania.
Right.
And so over time, I really got interested in how people with visual impairments learn about transportation options and how to plan their life around transportation. And then I hooked up with Dr. Ann Korn, who at the time was at Vanderbilt University. And Dr. Korn actually is somebody with low vision who's been what we call a bioptic driver. So she drives with a special telescope that she can use to see things in the distance. But most of the time, you're not looking through that telescope. So you have to have some pretty good vision to be a low vision driver who uses bioptics. So eventually we developed a book that we called Finding Wheels. And the first one came out in 2000. Don't buy it. Even if it's on Amazon, do not buy the 2000 Finding Wheels. What you want to buy is the 2020 version of it. And that's because just in the 20 years between the first version of Finding Wheels and the version that we have today, which is Finding Wheels, Strategies to Build Independent Travel Skills for Those with Visual Impairments, things had changed so much. We went to revise. And since 2000, we have GPS.
Yes.
We have smartphones. Yep. We have apps out the wazoo.
Yep.
And so the way I approach whether we're talking with teens in a group that my colleague Tina Hertzberg and I ran this past summer in South Carolina called Filling Your Transportation Toolbox, or with older adults who've had to stop driving due to a condition like glaucoma or diabetic retinopathy, is the same. Going back to that toolbox concept. Even for my own self, this tomorrow morning is going to be 29 degrees in Tucson, Arizona, which is pretty cold for us.
Yes.
And I'm not going to ride my bike the 2.5 miles to the gym. It is just too cold. So I've already texted a friend for tomorrow to say, hey, can I catch a ride with you to the gym? Her response was, I can get you there, but I can't get you home because I've got a doctor's appointment right afterwards. So my next thought is, okay, I have 3 choices on how to get home tomorrow. I can walk 2.5 miles, but I know I don't have time to do that. But I am capable of walking the 2.5 miles. But time-wise, I don't have an hour. Okay. I can do an Uber. That's going to be about $6 to $9, depending on the time of day. Let me look at my budget. Okay, I can make that work. I can ask my husband, hey, can I text you when I'm done at the gym and will you come and get me? Now, my husband does not sit around waiting to manage my transportation.
Amen.
And yeah, so sometimes he's available and sometimes he's not.
Right.
So I make sure I'm not dependent on him.
Correct.
But yeah, since I'm paying for half that car and half the gas and half the maintenance, if that car is available and it can come get me and I can save, $7 on an Uber, yeah, I'll ride with the husband.
Are you taking notes, Mose?
Yeah, I'm sitting here going, okay, I'll take you out to the grocery store after this.
But I think it's really important that when somebody is thinking about life and as a visually impaired person, that they get exposed to different forms of transportation. Dr. Korn and I wrote a little article a couple decades ago for families of young children about preparing them to potentially be an active person who is a non-driver.
Right.
And so even things like when you go to the park as a family, you go in the family minivan or the family SUV or the family whatever. But when you get to the park and you get that little person out of their car seat and you look around to make sure it's safe, have your child take you to the swing set rather than you taking them.
Yeah.
When it's time to go to grandma's house, maybe, an uncle can give us a ride home. So let's all take an Uber, even though you could drive the family car, or let's take the city bus. So we start to expose your child to different forms of transportation, because otherwise a lot of our kids are sitting on what I call the moving couch. And that's the back seat of whatever vehicle you have. And if they are sitting on the moving couch, it's really important for them to know what's going on around. Now, again, I'm not saying that we get Moses here telling us every little thing.
Right.
But what we want is, oh man, here's another traffic light. I got to stop. I'm looking for this new, baseball field where you're going to be playing soccer. I'm looking for a sign that tells us where we need to turn, or having your child turn off the volume on their on their phone and have them use their Braille device to read you the directions on where you need to turn. So help your child become active in travel long before they're of the age when all their friends are getting their driver's license and they're feeling pretty left out.
Absolutely. And it does come back to advocacy, right? It comes back to advocating for yourself. So, but you need those tools, right? You can't just all of a sudden one day wake up and go, oh, I need to figure out how to use the app on my phone to get a Lyft or Uber, or I need to figure out, do I have a friend who could drive? So it's that advocacy. And there has been a lot with the new administration about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there has been policy changes that removes that from, at least at the moment today, those federal programs, all of those roles and are gone. And to me, those DEI, and I always wanted them to add the A in there for accessibility. And I feel like we were just beginning to get the A in there. Now there's even the other three are gone. How do you think, as far as advocacy, moving forward in the blind and low vision community, how that is going to look? Because it is going to, it was my biggest fear of where it's going to impact is colleges, or universities, people, if you're blind or low vision, getting into higher ed. But it's also even with jobs. Our unemployment rate for blind and low vision people is astronomical now, or it was yesterday when I woke up. But I feel like now it's going to have a huge impact there. So, and I know my emails and phone blew up when this hit the news cycle. And I don't have a lot of answers because it is fairly new, at least now. What can you, I want your 2 cents worth here.
Sure.
Since you're the other Penny.
So I guess first off, I want to say the opinions I'm sharing are my own personal opinions. I do work for other entities, but this is, Dr. L. Penny Rosenblum speaking for Dr. L. Penny Rosenblum, not for any any entity. And then this is Penny, the lady who likes to ride her bike, speaking for her own personal experience, as somebody who is, happens to have low vision and very much identifies as a person with a visual impairment. I am very concerned about any shift, whether it's on behalf of people who have identify as different genders or might not be part of the white middle class, group in this United States, how any talk of moving away from diversity, equity, and inclusion is concerning to me as an American citizen. When I think specifically about, those of us who happen to have a visual impairment or support or advocate people with visual impairments, I do have a lot of concerns. We've really worked hard to get things like the Individuals with Disability Education Act that ensures that children have a free, appropriate public education and what we call the least restrictive environments. And if that's a lot of terms that aren't familiar to you, I apologize. That's a different podcast. The Americans with Disability Act that ensures somebody in a wheelchair can get into a building, that somebody can get housing, and to see all these things potentially on the misinformation / cutting / whatever blocks we're heading towards is concerning. Specifically for people with visual impairments, access is very concerning to me. We have so many websites and apps and other things that are not accessible already. And it's been very slow going, making inroads with manufacturers and publishers. I see all that really stopping and or going backwards, which I just think is going to snowball, whether it's a third grader doing their math homework, somebody taking their SATs, working to get into college, or somebody in the job site who, needs to get this presentation together to present to a group of, shareholders tomorrow. I think we're really setting up people for experiencing more discrimination, more exclusion rather than inclusion. I would really like to think on an individual level that most of us will come into contact with people who are able to see beyond the rhetoric and who will recognize that individuals have rights and responsibilities. And so if you're an employer and you have an employee who can't access something, that you'll still stand by that employee. For people who are visually impaired, I would say as much as you can, stand your ground. I would highly encourage you, if you find yourself in a situation where things aren't going well or there's been a big change, that you start documenting right from the beginning. And by documenting, I mean you keep a record of emails, telephone calls, who you sent letters to, if you're sending letters, and you can afford to send them certified so that a signature is required, so that if you do find yourself in a legal situation, you can document the steps that you took to work to advocate for your rights or your child's rights or your family member's rights. But I don't have the answer. I'm concerned about my own personal civil liberty, not just because I happen to have a visual impairment. I also happen to be Jewish. I also happen to live 70 miles from a border.
And you're also a female.
I'm also a female. So I just think we all need to try to be good to each other, and we need to recognize that it's a few people who are making a lot of noise that don't even realize the impact they might even be having on their own family members or their neighbors or their best friends or their wife who was born in a different country. Reach out to your congressional person, put an op-ed in the local paper, start going to the zoning commission meeting if, you're experiencing housing discrimination. So you can kind of throw up your hands and say, well, there's nothing I can do, but there's always something you can do. You may not get the outcome that you want.
Right.
But we all have, at least as of today, we still have a right in this country to freedom of speech. So don't be afraid to speak up.
Yeah. Well, because to me, if you are an American, just because, say you were a brilliant blind person, you lost your sight, you still want a job. You're still hardworking. and the right to have that job or to go to school or to be a part of the community, that does not make you a socialist or a communist. It makes you an American.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So-
we could get going on that.
Yeah.
So it's time for another dad joke.
Penny, do you have any takeaways for our audience out there?
I think when I'm reflecting on the topics we've talked about today, and advocacy is such an important one, that I want folks to walk away, no matter whether they're a person themselves who happens to have a visual impairment, whether they're a family member or, a parent especially, to think about it's little steps.
Yeah.
And even though we can get caught up in the big, political situation, we were just chatting about it here at the end of the podcast, we each have the opportunity to make a difference today. And so what can you do today that's going to plant a seed for the future so that that person who happens to have a visual impairment is going to be as independent and is going to have success no matter what choices they make, or in some cases, what doors may or may not be open to them.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for saying that, because I think it is so easy to get frightened with this big thing, and I know for myself, I have sat on many commissions and boards and things like that, locally as well as nationally. And that's what I tell, students, and I tell young adults and even seniors, if you want to make changes, be part of that change in whatever small way or big way that you can, and you can be part of, that change. And I know for myself, sitting on my local disability advisory commission, I really feel like I am making an impact, regardless of what the federal government is doing. I do feel like I'm making changes right here locally that maybe will grow out. So, Penny, thank you so much. I also want to thank your mom for planting those seeds, right? She was the one that, led by example, but she also planted those seeds with you. And I'm sure, and you've talked about some of your teachers and that planted those seeds. And I too can look back, and I've talked about it here on the Blind Check. There's been a few teachers out there that I would not have been the person I am today without all of those seeds growing up. So
Yeah, absolutely. And none of us ever know the interaction we have with somebody, how that's going to impact our life.
That's right.
And, part of our unintentional or sometimes intentional actions are going to impact how other people experience those with visual impairments. So, unfortunately, whether we want to or not, we're often a messenger for what's appropriate and what's not appropriate for people who are visually impaired.
Absolutely. And the little girl, Marcia, this is my white gate. You can talk to me. And I love that. Just going to picture that in my head all day today.
I love it.
Yeah. Advocate for yourself. Community, plant those seeds. I love it. Love it. Well, thank you again, Penny. And thank you, everybody, for dropping in week after week. The Blind Check has just been exploding. So it's obvious. It shows that there is a need. People are really, thirsting for stories and information and connection, and we really, really appreciate it. Please continue. Tell your friends. Rate us. We love 5 stars. Who doesn't like 5 stars? And leave us a comment. Leave us a comment. We love it. And remember to be kind to yourself this week, and try to find a way to be kind to somebody else. It's good for your soul.